Captain Olivia Hall stood on the observation deck of the SS Pioneer, gazing out into the abyss of space. The colony of Elysium 7 was a tiny blue speck in the distance, nestled on the edge of the Zenith sector, a patch of the galaxy known for its rough terrain and even rougher inhabitants. But it was a colony that had prospered. Elysium 7 had an agricultural bounty that made it a valuable asset to the Terran Empire. Today, it was just another routine stop, until it wasn't. "Captain, we've got a problem," Lieutenant Sarah Decker's voice crackled over the comm. Liv's fingers drummed on the railing, a signal that she was listening. Decker didn't waste time. "The Xyloids, they're acting strange. I think you need to see this." The Xyloids weren't exactly a common sight. In fact, they were an enigmatic species from the Goron cluster, known for their sharp intellects and their tendency to keep to themselves. But the Terran Empire had been trading with them for years now, and despite their aloof nature, they'd been essential partners in the growing galactic alliance. This strange behavior was out of the ordinary. Liv made her way to the science deck, where Decker and the rest of the team had gathered. The crew, already aware that something was amiss, parted to give her space as she entered. A live feed from the colony's central square filled the main screen. It showed a group of Xyloids, tall, angular beings with bioluminescent skin, their glowing blue markings flickering erratically, huddled around something. They were staring at it as if it was some sort of ancient artifact. On closer inspection, the object wasn't an artifact at all. "It's cheese," Liv murmured, more to herself than anyone else. Decker's voice came from behind her. "Yes, Captain. Cheese. We've confirmed it, it's a rare Terran delicacy, actually. Hard cheese. The kind we brought to the colony for trade. They're consuming it." Liv's brow furrowed. Xyloids didn't eat human food, not in any meaningful way. Their physiology couldn't process most Earth-based substances. But here they were, clustered around the cheese like it was the Holy Grail. "Are they okay?" Liv asked, though it was an odd question to ask. After all, nothing about this situation seemed okay. Decker shook her head, her eyes wide. "No. They're losing control. Look." The camera zoomed in, focusing on a particularly large Xyloid whose glowing skin seemed to flicker more erratically by the second. The creature's posture stiffened, and then it fell to its knees, clutching its head. One by one, the others followed suit, their behavior shifting from curiosity to desperation. One of the Xyloids reached down, grabbed another chunk of cheese, and shoved it into its mouth. Its hand trembled, and its breathing became rapid. "What the hell?" Liv whispered, more to herself than to anyone in particular. "We're not sure what's happening, but the readings we've taken show their vital signs are spiking." "It's like they're addicted," Decker said, her voice thick with disbelief. "Addicted to cheese?" Liv echoed. It sounded absurd, but the footage was clear. The Xyloids were fixated on the cheese in a way that no rational species should behave. Liv turned away from the screen. "Get me a direct link to the colony's governor. Now." A few moments later, the face of Governor Tessa Rigel appeared on the screen. She was a veteran of the Terran Diplomatic Corps, seasoned by years of working with alien species. But even she looked shaken, her usual composure broken. "Governor, what's happening there?" Liv's voice was sharp, her eyes never leaving Rigel's. "Captain, it's hard to explain. It's the Xyloids, Rigel hesitated, her lips curling in something like confusion. "They're behaving erratically. They're consuming everything we brought. I don't know why. I don't even know if they understand what they're doing." Liv took a deep breath. "Is it just the Xyloids? Has any other species been affected?" Rigel looked down, the lines of her face deepening with concern. "There's something else, Captain. The local Elysium authorities have been making observations. One of the native species, the Vissari, has begun behaving in a similar way. They're not as severe, but they're showing signs of increased aggression. It's like they're obsessed. It's not just the Xyloids." Liv's gut churned. There was something far bigger at play here. A small, innocuous Earth product was sending shockwaves through the galactic equilibrium. She looked at Decker. "Get me the data. I need to know everything about this cheese. Now." Decker nodded quickly and left the room, no doubt to sift through the crew's latest reports. Liv's eyes stayed fixed on the screen, her mind racing. Something about this situation felt wrong on a visceral level. Cheese wasn't supposed to have this kind of effect. It wasn't even supposed to be possible. Minutes later, Decker returned with a detailed report on the chemical composition of the cheese. It was ordinary, even banal, by human standards. Nothing about it seemed out of the ordinary. But the reactions in alien biology told a different story. The compound in this cheese, there's something in it that's reacting with alien neural systems, Decker explained. It's not just a food. It's almost like it's altering their behavior. We're not sure why yet, but it's causing a dependency. The more they consume, the worse it gets. Liv absorbed the information, her mind already working through the possibilities. This wasn't just a diplomatic incident. It could be far worse. The stakes were higher than anyone realized. Humanity had just unknowingly created something that could send the galaxy into chaos. "Decker, I want every available scientist. We have to start studying this right now. I need a full analysis within the hour. We need to understand exactly what's happening before this gets out of hand." The urgency in her voice had a chilling effect on the crew. Liv turned back to Rigel's screen, her face hardening. "Governor, I need your full cooperation. The xyloids in Visari need to be contained. Don't let this spread. I'll be there shortly to assess the situation." Rigel nodded solemnly. "Understood, Captain. But I fear, this might be more than just a local issue. The xyloids are respected, feared even, in the Goran cluster. If word of this spreads, it could destabilize everything." Liv's gaze hardened. "That's why we need to stop this before it goes any further." The line went silent, the weight of the situation settling over the crew like a thick fog. This wasn't just about cheese. It was about something far more dangerous. Something that could unravel the fabric of the galaxy itself. And Captain Olivia Hall was going to find out exactly what it was. Captain Olivia Hall stood in the heart of the SS Pioneer's command center, the hum of the ship's engines providing a steady backdrop to the tense silence that filled the room. Her gaze was fixed on the large holodisplay, where a live feed of the Galactic Council chamber flickered. The deep-set faces of alien diplomats stared back at her, their expressions as cold and dispassionate as the void outside. Threk Kal, the supreme envoy of the Galactic Council, sat at the center of the group. His angular features and emotionless eyes were a familiar sight to Liv, though she'd never had a direct encounter with him. Until now. "This is absurd," Liv muttered under her breath, though no one in the room needed to hear it. The meeting had been called in the wake of the chaos at Elysium 7. The xyloid's strange behavior was only the beginning. As word of the cheese-induced frenzy spread across the galaxy, the Council's call for intervention had been swift and decisive. "You're sure about the timing of this, Captain?" asked Lieutenant Decker, her voice low, as though she too understood the gravity of what was unfolding. She stood beside Liv, studying the holographic display. Liv nodded, a sharp edge to her voice. "The Council wants to declare Substance C, a byproduct of our cheese, banned across all territories. Every planet, every species. No exceptions." Decker's brow furrowed. "So it's official then. They've decided that this cheese is a threat?" "It's not just the cheese," Liv replied. "It's the effect the cheese has had. We're talking about a chemical imbalance in alien biology. Their bodies can't process it, at least, not the way humans do. It's becoming an addiction, a chemical dependency." She paused, turning her eyes back to the holodisplay. Threk had begun speaking. "Captain Hall, you are fully aware of the consequences your species' actions have wrought." Threk's voice, mechanical and smooth, echoed across the comm link. "The xyloids have expressed their concerns that your products are contaminating the integrity of galactic peace. The Visari are also affected, though their symptoms are less severe. What have you to say about this? Liv didn't flinch. The pressure was mounting, but she refused to back down. The cheese wasn't meant for this, she said calmly. We didn't know. We only brought it as a trade good for Elysium 7, and I certainly didn't know it would have this kind of impact. Threk's gaze was unyielding. Ignorance is no excuse, Captain. The balance of the galaxy is at risk. The Xyloids are a respected race. The Visari are a militaristic species with great influence. These beings are now addicted to something you deem a trivial foodstuff. Your cheese is a weapon. The Council has deemed it a threat to galactic stability. Then why hasn't the Council done more to contain it? Liv shot back, her voice growing firmer. Why wasn't the potential danger flagged before now? We didn't know our cheese could cause this. Threk's eyes narrowed, though his expression remained stoic. You are not the first to assume that human products are harmless. Your species' penchant for inventiveness is well known. But I must remind you, Captain, the Council has acted swiftly. The Galactic Fleet will intercept all trade routes. All human shipments of this substance will be seized and destroyed. Liv's pulse quickened. That's not an answer. You can't just ban us from the galaxy because of a mistake. We're not a threat. You are now, Captain, Threk said flatly. And you will remain one unless you can prove otherwise. The Council demands a full cessation of all further distribution of Substance C. He leaned forward, his cold stare locking with hers. We will not negotiate. The link clicked off, leaving an oppressive silence in the command center. I can't believe it's come to this, Decker muttered, breaking the silence. They want to treat us like we're some sort of galactic pariah. Liv took a deep breath, letting the silence stretch out before she spoke. We need to find out what's happening with this cheese. We need a team down on Elysium 7. We'll investigate how the Xyloids and Visari are reacting. I don't care if the Council bans us. They can't ignore the facts. Decker nodded. I'll start preparing the shuttle. You're going down there yourself? Liv glanced at her lieutenant, considering the question. I'm not going to sit here while the Council makes decisions about us. If this is really a mistake, we need to understand it. We need to stop it before it spreads. The ship shuddered as the SS Pioneer shifted course, setting a direct trajectory for Elysium 7. Liv's fingers curled around the console, her thoughts swirling. A ban wasn't just a slap on the wrist. It would isolate humanity from the entire galaxy, severing trade routes, alliances, and any hope of peaceful diplomacy. The shuttle ride to the surface was smooth, a rare moment of calm in an increasingly turbulent situation. Liv stared out the window, the rocky landscape of Elysium 7 growing larger with each passing second. The shuttle touched down outside the colony's main settlement. As the airlock hissed open, Liv was met by Governor Rigel and her team of scientists, their faces drawn and grim. Liv had expected concern, but she hadn't expected this level of urgency. Captain, Rigel greeted her quickly. I've arranged for a full briefing. The situation is worse than we thought. Tell me everything, Liv said, her voice sharp. Rigel led her through the colony's sprawling facility. The Xyloids have become almost fanatical in their desire for more of your cheese. It's beyond mere consumption now. They've been fighting each other, trying to get to the supply. Liv's stomach twisted. Is there anything that could reverse it? We don't know. The biochemical reaction is like nothing we've ever encountered. Some of our top biologists have been analyzing it, but the results are inconclusive. Whatever's in your cheese is creating an addiction in species with very different physiology. It's as if they can't stop themselves. As they spoke, the team passed a series of holding areas where alien species, Xyloids, Visari, and others, were being quarantined, their eyes wide with fear or confusion. They were being kept away from the cheese, but the damage had already been done. Liv's mind raced. A question nagged at her. Could it be something biological in the cheese? Something we missed? Rigel nodded. That's what we're trying to figure out. But even if we find a cure, the Council has already made its decision. The galaxy won't let this slide. Liv's eyes hardened. They've underestimated us. And I'm not going to let humanity be cast aside. Do you think you can convince them? Rigel asked. Liv took a deep breath. I'm going to make them see that we're not the problem. This isn't about our cheese. It's about fear of something they don't understand. As the team moved deeper into the colony's research labs, Liv realized the true scale of the crisis was far greater than just a banned product. The galaxy was watching, waiting. And unless they found a solution fast, humanity's place in the stars was about to be decided by forces far beyond their control. The sterile halls of the Elysium 7 colony lab hummed with the low thrum of machines working overtime. Liv stood beside Governor Rigel, her eyes scanning the monitors displaying a myriad of biological data. It was clear that every test, every result, was adding more questions rather than answers. The cheese, Substance C, was not just a foodstuff. It was a chemical weapon in disguise, warping the very biology of the beings who consumed it. We've isolated the compound, said Dr. Lin, the lead biologist on the project, her voice tinged with both exhaustion and determination. It's a molecular structure we've never seen before. It's unlike anything in the galactic database. It's almost as if it was designed to interact with specific neural pathways. Designed? Liv asked, her brow furrowing. You mean, this was on purpose? Dr. Lin shook her head. We can't be sure, but it's too precise to be a fluke. Whatever the purpose, it's altering the brain chemistry of the xyloids and Visari in ways we don't fully understand. The addiction is the most troubling. The more they consume, the more intense the craving becomes. The weight of her words hit Liv like a punch. She'd suspected something was off, but this was beyond what she could have imagined. A food product, something so innocuous, had been weaponized, unintentionally or otherwise. It could trigger chaos in the galaxy. We need to find a way to reverse this before it spirals out of control, Rigel said, her voice firm. The Council is already preparing sanctions. If this continues, we'll be completely isolated. Liv took a deep breath, trying to steady the rising tide of panic that threatened to break through her composure. What about the xyloids? Can we negotiate with them? Stop the spread? Dr. Lin's face darkened. We've tried, Captain. But they're not themselves anymore. They're consumed by the craving. We can't reason with them. Their behavior is erratic. They're fighting amongst themselves for more of the substance. We've had to quarantine entire groups. Liv's mind raced. She couldn't let this spiral. The xyloids were a respected species. If they were lost to this madness, it would send shockwaves through the galaxy. She had to find a solution. Fast. I'm going to talk to them, Liv said, her voice resolute. Rigel and Dr. Lin exchanged a worried glance. Captain, I don't think that's wise, Rigel said, her tone cautious. The xyloids are dangerous right now. They're not thinking clearly. Their need for the cheese is driving them to violence. I don't care, Liv replied, her voice hardening. We need to try. If we don't stop this, it'll be humanity that gets blamed. I'm not letting that happen. Rigel sighed but nodded. We'll prepare the shuttle. But be careful. Liv didn't wait for further objections. She strode out of the lab and made her way to the shuttle bay, her mind set on what she had to do. The colony's main holding facility for the xyloids was located on the outskirts of the settlement. There, the most affected were being isolated from the others. As the shuttle descended through the atmosphere, Liv stared out the window at the sprawling, industrial colony below. It seemed so ordinary, so unaffected by the turmoil unfolding just beneath its surface. The shuttle touched down with a soft jolt, and Liv was met by a contingent of armed guards, their faces grim. We're not taking any chances, Captain, one of the officers said, his voice strained with apprehension. The xyloids in here, there's no telling what they might do. We've had to use force to contain them. Liv nodded but said nothing. She had no time for fear. The fate of the galaxy was on the line. Inside the holding facility, the atmosphere was thick with tension. A few xyloids were gathered in one of the holding pens, their skin pulsating with erratic flashes of light. They were twitching, their eyes wild with desperation. They were almost unrecognizable from their usual serene, intelligent selves. The addiction to the cheese had reduced them to a primal state of need. "Captain Hall," a voice called from behind her. Liv turned to see Rigel approaching, flanked by a team of armed guards. "We've set up a containment field," Rigel said, her face etched with worry. "But the xyloids are already showing signs of aggression. I don't think you can reason with them in this state." "I don't have a choice," Liv said, her voice firm. "I need to try." The guards reluctantly stepped aside, and Liv approached the containment field. The xyloids inside stopped their frantic movements and turned their glowing eyes toward her. They were still alien, but their behavior was far from the dignified creatures she had studied in the past. They were wild, desperate, and their only focus seemed to be the cheese that lay in front of them. "Do you think they can understand you?" Rigel asked softly, her voice tinged with concern. Liv didn't answer immediately. She could see the fear in the governor's eyes, but she had to try. "I have to believe they can." Liv stepped closer to the containment field. The xyloids watched her intently, their eyes flickering with recognition. Liv took a deep breath, then spoke. "Listen to me," she said, her voice steady. "This isn't you. You're being controlled by something that wasn't meant to affect you. You have to fight it." The xyloids' eyes flashed brighter, their bodies stiffening. Some of them growled low in their throats, a sound that was both unsettling and desperate. "I know you can hear me," Liv continued, taking another step forward. "You're smarter than this. You're not animals." One of the xyloids took a slow, deliberate step toward her. Its eyes locked onto Liv, and for a moment, the frantic energy seemed to dissipate. It was as though it recognized her. There was something in its gaze that suggested a flicker of understanding. But then, without warning, the creature lunged forward, slamming into the containment field with a force that sent a shockwave through the room. The others followed suit, their behavior turning even more erratic. Liv took a step back, her heart pounding in her chest. She could see the raw hunger in their eyes, the desperation to feed. The craving for the cheese had completely consumed them. "They're not listening," Rigel said, her voice strained. "It's too late for them." Liv clenched her fists. "We can't give up. There has to be a way to reverse this. We've got to find it." As she turned to leave, a chilling realization settled over her. The xyloids weren't just under the influence of a chemical. They were addicted to power. The cheese was a symbol of control. If they could no longer think for themselves, then there were forces out there pulling the strings. Forces far beyond anything Liv had ever imagined. And now, she had to figure out who or what was behind this and why they were using the cheese as a weapon. Liv stood at the edge of the observation deck, looking out over the colony below. The sun had set, casting an eerie red glow over the rocky landscape. The silence of the night felt heavy, as if the entire world was holding its breath. The xyloids were still contained, but the violence and the desperation were only escalating. If they couldn't find a solution soon, it would be more than just the xyloids who suffered. The entire galaxy was teetering on the brink of chaos. Governor Rigel entered the observation room quietly, her face drawn and pale. She didn't need to say anything, Liv could read the exhaustion in her eyes. "We're running out of time, Captain," Rigel said, her voice flat. "The Council is growing more impatient by the minute. If we don't get this under control, we'll be facing sanctions, and worse. They're already considering military action." Liv's gaze remained fixed on the colony below. The thought of military intervention was chilling. They were not only fighting for the xyloid's sanity but for humanity's future in the galaxy. If the Council decided that humanity was responsible for a biological weapon, the repercussions would be catastrophic. "I know," Liv said quietly. "I know. But we don't even know what's causing this. We're chasing shadows." She turned toward Rigel, her eyes hardening. "Someone's behind this. Someone's orchestrating the chaos. And we need to find out who. Rigel stared at her for a long moment, considering her words. Do you really think someone's pulling the strings? There's no way this is a coincidence. The cheese, it's not just some accident. It's too precise. Too perfect in how it's affecting the xyloids and Viscari. Whoever's responsible, they knew exactly what they were doing. Rigel nodded slowly. We've been too focused on the symptoms. Maybe we need to go after the cause. The weight of the realization settled on Liv's shoulders. She had been so caught up in the immediate crisis that she hadn't considered the bigger picture. This wasn't just about an addictive substance. It was a plan. Someone had designed it to destabilize entire species, entire systems. We need to go deeper, Liv said, her tone final. We need to find out who's behind this. Someone had to introduce the substance, right? And they did it for a reason. Rigel placed a hand on her shoulder. Be careful, Captain. If this goes deeper than we think, we might be walking into something much larger than we can handle. Liv nodded, feeling the weight of her responsibility. She wasn't just a soldier anymore. She was a diplomat, a leader, someone who had to make decisions that would affect the future of the galaxy. And right now, that future was at risk. The next morning, Liv convened a meeting with the colony's top scientists, military strategists, and intelligence officers. She had one goal in mind, to dig deeper into the origins of Substance C. I've reviewed the reports, Lieutenant Decker said, her eyes scanning the data on the display. There's no evidence of tampering in the shipment. The cheese arrived as advertised, nothing unusual in its production or delivery. It was tested thoroughly before being brought to the colony. Which means someone here introduced the substance, Liv said, her voice sharp. We've got a mole. Decker's eyes narrowed. That's a bold accusation, Captain. Do you have any evidence? Not yet. But think about it. The xyloids were the first to react, the first to go into a frenzy. And the Viscari were close behind. Whoever's behind this knew exactly how to exploit their biology. They knew what it would do, and they knew who it would affect. Liv turned to the intelligence officer, a sharp-eyed woman named Kira. We need to look into the records of anyone who had access to the shipment. Any contacts, any affiliations. There has to be something. Kira nodded, her fingers flying over the console. I'll dig into the shipping logs. We can start by tracking down anyone who had contact with the supplier. It'll take a while to sift through the data, but we can get started. Liv turned her gaze back to the larger holographic map of the colony, her thoughts racing. She had suspected something like this for a while, but now the pieces were beginning to fit together. This wasn't just a case of a dangerous substance, it was an act of sabotage. Someone was using it to manipulate the galactic balance of power. Start with the supplier, Liv said. See if there's any connection to a larger organization. I want to know who benefits from this. The xyloids are only the beginning. The Viscari are next, and I doubt they'll be the last. The room fell silent as everyone focused on their tasks, the urgency of the situation pressing down on them. Liv could feel the weight of time ticking away. Every moment they wasted brought them closer to an irreversible disaster. Several hours later, Kira returned with troubling news. I found something, she said, her voice tense. The supplier we're dealing with, Gillos Corp., has connections to a rogue faction of the Viscari. They've been operating in the shadows for years, providing black market technology and bioengineering services to various parties. It's a front for something much larger. Liv's pulse quickened. A rogue faction? Are you sure? Kira nodded grimly. Gillos is a legitimate company on the surface, but it's a cover for a network of black market dealings. The Viscari rogue group has been linked to several incidents in the past, illegal bioweapons testing, destabilizing colonies, creating chaos to shift the balance of power. They've been using companies like Gillos to push their agendas without detection. The pieces clicked into place. The Viscari, famous for their military prowess, had always been a formidable force. But now they were playing a different game. They weren't just waging war, they were manipulating the very fabric of the galaxy, creating instability to push their own agenda. I knew it, Liv muttered under her breath. This wasn't just a random act. They've been planning this for years. We need to move fast, Kira said. If they're behind this, they're not going to stop. And if the Council gets wind of their involvement, they'll act without hesitation. Liv's eyes hardened with resolve. We'll expose them. I'll take this directly to the Council. They need to know the truth, and they need to know that we're not the ones to blame. The shuttle ride back to the colony's central command center was silent, each member of the team lost in their thoughts. Liv stared out the window at the rocky terrain below, her mind racing with the implications of their discovery. The Visari's hand in this chaos wasn't just about the cheese, it was about power, control, and manipulation on a galactic scale. By the time the shuttle landed, Liv had made up her mind. She wasn't going to let the Visari's shadow games take humanity down with them. The truth needed to be exposed. And she was the one who would do it. Let's get to work, Liv said, her voice steady. It's time to take the fight to them.